Welcome back to another episode of the Severance podcast here on RHAP. We know scripted TV, we know Severance.com, and we know Severance Season 1, Episode 2, Half Loop. That's what the episode is called, and I am so excited to talk about it. Joining me here to sample all the delicious wares, all of the various types of melon on display here in the second episode of Severance. First and foremost, the great Dr. Melissa. Melissa, which melon are you going for?
I mean, I think watermelon. There was no watermelon on this thing. I gotta say that like the diversity of melon in this melon bar is not very big. But yeah, I think personally I like to focus on the effects of podcasting, although it does occasionally give me a bit of dizziness. So I have to like hold on to a handrail.
Dr. Amanda is also here. Dr. Amanda, could you tell me something about your podcast, Any, that has not yet been shared in the podcast space?
Well, my podcast, Any, is a wonderful bread baker and enjoys the sound of podcasts.
Yeah. There you go.
Those are some of my attributes. I'll say I am a little bit self-conscious because now we do the podcast on video.
Yep.
Gosh, and I'm afraid the melon bloat has already set in. So.
It's certainly been a problem for me. The melon bloat is real. I'm also yesterday, I was so sleepy. I was in and out of consciousness all day yesterday.
Like Irv, did you see the black ooze?
Yeah, today I did, because I did drift back off. And then shortly after I watched today's episode, I took a little nap. And it was all black ooze, all sorts of gross globules of black ooze. Don't sleep on the job, Melissa. This is a big thing.
Josh, we got to get you a wellness check.
Lord knows that's true.
Josh will deduct our snoozing time from our podcast paycheck. So
okay, a little bit. I also love when he like takes the money away from Irving's paycheck, but like he does it in this sort of like, but we're gonna get you a wellness checkup, and I hope everything's gonna be okay. Like there's like this like sort of like soft empathy to Milchick there. That's just like. Yeah. The whole thing is just so scattered and weird.
And this reassurance that they're not going to take him to the break room as a result of this. It's like, oh gosh.
No, Milchick nails the abusive paternalism. It's really like quite his jam.
It's really his jam. We're jamming out to Severance. This is a podcast that features informed guidance. While this is half loop, Melissa, Amanda, and myself have done the full loop on season 1 of Severance previously. You can go back into the archives, WeKnowSeverance.com. Just search for We Know Severance in your podcatcher of choice. You can go all the way back to the beginning of the feed to get our I recommended the podcast to a friend yesterday. And if that friend is listening, I'm going to borrow his phrase. That was our virgin viewing of Severance. That was before we knew what was happening on Severance. Now we know what happened in season 1. We will not be bringing major spoilers into this, but we will be guiding people on their first time through for maybe you should pay attention to this. This seems like an interesting thing. Also, what are we interested in now having completed the season? So all of that good stuff, you can write to us, severancerhap@gmail.com. That's severancerhap@gmail.com. We got some email this week addressed to you, Melissa. It was from Fran. Fran wrote in to tell you that the door dance on So You Think You Can Dance was Katie and Twitch.
Yes. I also got shared to it in the former PSR Discord as well, like almost immediately. So thank you to all the people who shared it. It gave me a lot of feels to watch Twitch dance again. So that was very lovely. So thank you. And for the people, the real So You Think You Can Dance fans like instantly knew what I was talking about. And I was like, I have this vision of a dance and I just can't remember. And it's because it's from like season 2 of So You Think You Can Dance. It's from like 20 years ago.
Your Severance podcast, and he was not prepared to pull the So You Think You Could Dance intel that quickly.
Yeah, no, but it was there. It was just under, it was, my outie knew it and the innie just like couldn't access that information. It was, from the outside world. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Well, let's pull in from the outside world. Our great producer, Jessica Sterling, has provided us with a quick plot recap of Severance Season 1.
Jessie S, as she prefers to be
Jessie
called.
S, that's right. So let's go over it. We'll tell you what happened in the episode, and then we're going to talk it through. So let's begin with Jess's write-up. Once again, we begin. Hey, kids, what's for dinner? In Severance Season 1, Episode 2, Half Loop, Mark's Innie is adjusting to his new leadership role at Lumen and trying to train Helly, who remains resistant to her severed life. Helly makes several attempts to escape or communicate with her outie self, including leaving notes for her other identity, but all attempts are blocked by Lumen's strict protocols. Mark takes the fall for her and is sent to the break room, a mysterious room at the end of a long, narrow hallway where employees are sent when they don't act right. Meanwhile, Mark's outie goes on a date with his sister's midwife. I'm going to say this really... Alexa! I'm just trying to say it really fast because I don't want to trigger any noise-activated devices in your home. Alexa is her name. It doesn't end well when a drunken Mark has an altercation with a few members of the Whole Mind Collective who are passing out flyers about the dangers of severed workers. The next day, Mark calls out sick to meet with Petey, whose health deteriorates as he suffers from reintegration sickness, which includes hallucinations and severe confusion. Despite this, he provides Mark with clues about Lumen's operations and a hidden past that they both shared. Mark takes Petey in, giving him a place to sleep in his garage. Also, Petey has a very strange shower encounter that I am sure we will talk about later. Back at Lumen, Irving is having visions of a black gooey substance coating his cubicle. He gets caught dozing and is sent to wellness, where he happens upon Bert, Christopher Walken, the head of optics and design. Irving then listens to facts about his outie from Miss Casey, who's the head of health and wellness here, to make him feel better. Who doesn't feel relaxed when they're told they're losing points for not appreciating each fact equally? It's totally fine. On the bright side, Helly can now sense emotion in the numbers she's refining. And did we mention a melon bar? That's what goes down in Severance Season 1, Episode 2, which, Amanda, I think is just like a great episode that has so much packed into it, including like fairly, a real visceral, I'll say, a very visceral way of experiencing what the day-to-day is like for the severed employees at Lumen.
Yeah, and I think it starts right from the pre-credits opening. And this is actually the first episode where we get the Severance opening credits. So for first-time watchers, welcome to the credits. Very trippy. But the whole pre-credits sequence is from the point of view of Helly's outie. Yeah. And I forgot that we get to spend I remembered that this was part of the early few episodes of the season, but we do spend quite a bit of time with Helly's outie, and I was very intrigued to see that. But I think that it's such a clever bit of storytelling to retell an exact sequence that we've already seen the other side of from a different perspective. And in particular, Melissa, back to the dance through the doorway, we get to see what was happening on the other side of that door that was propelling Helly so forcefully back onto the severed floor. So that is a very visceral scene. Also, speaking of visceral reactions, we get to see some neurosurgery and some very evocative bone dust and a drilling sound that haunts my dreams.
You know what? I don't vividly remember the details of this, but I certainly remember this happening the first time I watched this episode and being like, I'm so glad I podcast about this show with brain people because I have questions about this. Melissa, on the rewatch of this and watching the severance procedure take place, literally drilling a chip of some kind into Helly's head. What I do remember is I think you were impressed with this and that the research that went into like how this might theoretically work translates really well on screen in terms of like some accuracy here.
Yeah, it makes me so happy to see this scene because it's just there's so many portrayals in media where they just throw random words that sound sciency at things, and it's annoying because if you know the meaning of those words, you're like, none of that means what you just said. And the two shows in my experience that get it right are Letterkenny and Severance, which is they're two very different classes of shows, but it's very fun. And for anybody that doesn't know, Letterkenny has a small sequence in which they're talking about the impact of exercise on the brain and the release of like brain-derived neurotrophic factors. And I was like, yeah, that's how that works. So anyway, that was a very random aside. But yeah, so these if you pause the image, and I know people might be not wanting to pause this scene and stop down, but if you pause it, the brain scans in the background that have all of the like rainbow colors on them, those are basically like structural imaging scans that highlight the white matter tracks in the brain. So your brain is made up of gray matter and white matter. You've probably heard like gray matter as a kind of colloquial term for the brain.
There's a company that Walter White founded in Breaking Bad.
Yeah, there you go. And so white matter is the parts of the brain, the parts of our neurons that are covered in like a fatty tissue that basically helps signals travel faster through the brain. And so there are these like, they're basically the connecting tracks between different parts of the brain, and they show how the front of the brain is connected to the back and how the sides are connected to each other and all that kind of stuff. So the different colors represent the different like directions that those tracks are in the brain. And so, you know, the red tracks are going like front to back and the blue tracks are going side to side, that kind of thing. So that's the very brief description of what a like diffusion tensor imaging.
Imaging, yes.
Yeah. And so that, first of all, is just very cool because it's makes sense that it would be kind of the connections within the brain that would be an interesting part. They also have this x-ray going on. And Helly's awake for this surgery. Normally, like during a neurosurgery like this, you might be actually like asking them questions to like make sure that you don't hit a part of the brain that you should not be and interfere with any processes that you shouldn't be. And then the last part of this is when the implant goes in, it comes in to basically, and now we're doing this on video. You can actually see where I'm pointing.
Oh yeah, point to the part of the brain.
Yeah, so the side of your brain.
For people who aren't watching the video, actually, as we are speaking, Amanda is performing the surgery on my brain while Melissa guides you through it.
Yeah, and Melissa, you better be pretty precise in your instructions because the bone dust is already flying.
Amanda, this is your chance. You can set some things right now.
Yeah, so basically the part like basically right above your ears is the temporal lobe in your brain. And part of the temporal lobe is parts of the brain referred to as the hippocampus and the amygdala. Your limbic system is kind of how they're referred to collectively. And the hippocampus is a spot that we think is largely associated with memory. And so the fact that that was where they inserted this implant is actually like a pretty, you know, it's obviously a bit of a like kind of overly simplistic view, but it is roughly like if you were to pick a single part of the brain most involved in memory, that would be it. So that was very cool. We also like your prefrontal cortex is very involved in memory. Like it's not just any one centralized thing, but if we were to just, you know, pick something, that would be where you would want to put it. The interesting thing as well, the hippocampus being very close to the amygdala is often what you use to process things like emotions. And so emotionally charged memories, for example, will involve both of those areas of the brain. And we sort of know this through we have there's structural MRI scans that you can do that look at the structure of the brain, but there's also functional MRI scans. And so there we look at people do different tasks while in an MRI scanner, and we look at what parts of the brain are using up a lot of glucose and oxygen at that time. And then those are considered like the active parts of the brain. And then we associate which parts of the brain are more active during certain tasks than others. And that's how we kind of come to learn some of these kinds of things, or in people, for example, who have damage to those areas of the brain and what kind of impairment they might be experiencing. So yeah, that's my big neuroscience spiel.
Yeah. And to just like add a couple of things to that, while it is absolutely, it's science fact, it's part of our present reality that people perform neurosurgery on awake individuals. I don't know if those awake individuals are usually dressed in their business wear.
Yeah, totally.
But like Melissa said, there are a lot of surgeries, particularly for epilepsy, where they'll do neurosurgery on individuals to remove parts of the brain that are producing the aberrant electrical signals that are causing seizures. And when they do that, they're talking to an awake person in order to assure that they're not damaging any tissue that they call eloquent brain tissue that does something. And so there is surgery happening on awake individuals. That's something that happens today. This particular surgery where somebody is going so deep into a brain structure.
They really go in there.
They go way deep in there. I
Probably
think that that's probably not entirely realistic that they could do something as efficiently as they do with Heli.
It goes that deep, it would tickle my sinuses. Like my nose like twitches when I watch that scene.
Okay.
I feel like I'm gonna sneeze.
And then the little guy, that little implant, there's neurostimulators and neural implants are being used to treat a number of conditions, like deep brain stimulation for Parkinson's disease, for severe depression, for chronic pain. People get spinal stimulation. So there's a lot of surgeries that are happening that are implanting something into the brain. This little severance chip, Josh, once it gets deep in there, it goes and its little wings stick out. And that's how you know it's in there good.
Yeah. That part freaked me out a little bit. I was like, okay, that's too far.
Well, maybe it helps explain why this episode also shows a lot more about Petey, including we learn about something called reintegration sickness, which Mark has never heard of before. And that's because Petey is the first dipshit to ever experience it. That's Petey's own words. I don't want to say that I'm calling Petey a dipshit. But by the end of the episode really like climaxes with this final scene set to Daydream, as Petey is having a nosebleed and he is suffering from these hallucinations where he sees himself in the shower, but he also still sees himself at the mirror, and he sees himself in his work attire, but he's also naked in the shower. And then we're just with him in the shower, and he kind of like drifts down, and he has this sort of catatonic look on his face. I cannot imagine that like removing the winged severance chip is an easy thing to do.
It's got some side effects.
Yeah.
So we don't know how like he you know, I think in this episode Petey refers to an elusive they. He had help with getting this little guy out of his head. But this was another thing that I think is interesting. And, you know, Melissa and I will continue to comment on this as it comes up in the show. But in addition to this kind of neuroscience veracity of some of the storytelling devices, I think that there's also kind of a psychological truth to this idea of, you know, we've already heard Mark talk about how he's chosen this life because there's a part of him that he wants to sort of bury down deep and not explore. There's he's sort of bifurcated the self in some ways, which is something that you'll hear in the language of psychotherapy, particularly the psychodynamic tradition of integration. This idea of becoming more integrated is actually a psychotherapeutic concept that involves the very painful process sometimes of you know, holding up these different versions of ourselves, or a version of ourself that we prefer not to think about, and bringing that to the surface and start trying to reconcile some of our inherent contradictions. So Petey is undergoing this process, and it seems like part of this reintegration is this glitchy moment where we see innie Petey and outie Petey coexisting in a way that is very upsetting.
Like seemingly, like the way it's depicted is like sharing the same physical space, which I think is such a great ending for the episode, when the episode begins obviously with the Heli stuff, but when we get past the Heli stuff, as mentioned, we get the credit sequence for the very first time, which is this very trippy, like sort of like Sims adjacent style to like just like Mark and a multitude, like an entire multiverse of Marks. You know, Adam Scott just like in this very strange erratic movements, going about his day, multiple Marks going about their day, Marks living inside of a Mark head. And at the very end of it, the work Mark and another Mark are in bed together and like are sharing the same physical space. So I think Melissa, it's very interesting that the show introduces that in the credit sequence and then closes this same episode out this early into the 9-episode run with sort of like seeing that kind of experience play out in live action on film with Petey.
Yeah, I think I sung the praises of this opening sequence when it happened because I had watched a YouTube video kind of recently before this show premiered where it was talking about the role of opening credit sequences and sort of the loss of them over time and how they're much less used nowadays, but that they serve such an important tone setting purpose that really good opening credit sequences can be very thought provoking. I think Orange is the New Black is always one that I think of here. I think the True Blood one is also like a really good example.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So like there are some like really incredible examples out there. And I think it's something that just like kind of often doesn't really get thought of all that much, but I think is when and done really, really well, like this one, I think it leaves you with such this sense of like mystery, like, oh, what does all of this mean? Unease around everything that's happening, the sort of like otherworldly nature of some of, again, the like choreography of this sequence. And we're getting references to the ooze, the implant, the garbage cans. There's like, it feels like there's so much to unpack here that it just kind of puts you in that mindset for this show, which is very exciting. And then, yeah, of course, this like kind of end scene where there's the two Marks next to each other and they sort of like glitch in and out into the one Mark and what that will end up meaning as we consider things like reintegration. I think that the reintegration stuff was something that really stood out for me in this watching of just, first of all, like curious about the specifics of how that happened, but then also the implications and like why Petey is experiencing the things that he is as a result of reintegration, because I don't know that there's anything inherent to what we know about the severance procedure that would result in that, but perhaps it is something about the methods through which you undo the severance procedure that are that would be part of my thinking is that these might be more side effects of reintegration than of actually like the severance procedure, and maybe there is a less like awful way of doing it if you were to like not be doing it in a greenhouse or wherever it was that Petey got this help.
Sounds like he's the first person this has ever been done to, is what is sort of what he intimates here.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, like it's not gonna, it's probably not gonna be done as cleanly as it could be done if it was, attempted on several other people first, or, it seems like a pretty new idea.
Yeah. Or done in like a proper hospital setting or anything like that. Yeah.
But I think some of Petey's experience could be explained on a purely psychological level of the trauma of confronting the fact that whatever, so he's starting to insinuate to Mark that whatever Lumen is doing is so terrible. So now he has to deal with the fact that he's been complicit with this. He has to understand that he was a willing participant in this world. He agreed to this procedure. He was basically, as we see Helly's initial reactions, like imprisoned and like abused. He says we've tried, like he says Grainer's a bad man. Like, so we have this idea that we don't like him, whatever they've gone through in Lumen is bad and abusive. And now the Petey that has the knowledge of the outside world, the knowledge of what happens in Lumen, and also whatever else he's learned along the way in terms of what their true intentions are, that could be inherently traumatic. And we also have, at this point, if we can extrapolate anything we know of Mark, Petey might have had this trauma that he was avoiding that now is kind of all crumbling down on him. And he's going through this alone. He's fearing for his life. So I think that there's something physiological that's happening to Petey as a result of the implant and the removal. But I bet that there's also something psychological that's happening in his unraveling because he's dealing with this trauma kind of hitting him like a ton of bricks.
Yeah. Let's get into our Kier ratings here, which maybe makes more sense, the tier incentives after watching this episode, which we'll use to talk through the rest of the episode. Just to remind you, Dylan is going to be the one who tells Helly what these tier incentives are. You get an eraser for 25% of the way. 50% of the way, you get a finger trap. We don't know what the 75% is yet, but we have called it a music dance experience. We shall find out what that means as we get further into the show. Fourth is for 100% completion, you get a caricature portrait, of which Dylan has so many.
An embarrassment of wealth in that regard.
An embarrassment of wealth. I think this episode is an embarrassment of wealth. So let's start with handing out some erasers, which are standing in for us for theories.
They're mostly decorative, Josh.
They're very decorative. They are either theories that we are developing on a rewatch, or they are things that we think you should be thinking about. And I'll just start because there's actual theorizing that happens in the episode.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
I feel like we should just begin there when Helly, who is trying to round up the scary numbers, but she just can't see the scary numbers yet, is asking Dylan, what do we even think this is about? And Dylan theorizes we're moving into the ocean. What must have happened outside of Lumen to cause us to sever ourselves? It must have been so awful that we are down here for nothing short of saving humanity at the expense of every eel in the ocean.
That's the only obstacle to us populating the ocean is those damn eels.
We cannot coexist. We will not live alongside the eels. We will obliterate them by sending this numerical data to the drones that are firing missiles at the eels. This is Dylan's theory of what's going on. Helly asks, is that really the leading theory? And he says, well, Irving thinks that we're just taking all the curses out of movies. So those are the two theories on the board as to what macro data refinement is, Amanda.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Dylan, it's a really smart theory. It's definitely sound, well formed. He obviously he can't research it because of the constraints of the severance procedure. Unfortunately, we have seen the outside world, and at least what we've seen so far,
Haven't seen the ocean yet.
Not in the ocean. No eels. Not an eel in sight. Now, maybe this is an island and the rest of the world is fully submerged and battling the eels.
Yeah. Congress has already moved to the ocean. So, that's working out.
So unfortunately, I don't see a lot of confirmation for Dylan's hypothesis. Irv's is still live. That's still in play.
Yeah. Melissa, we have yet to see a movie play on Severance other than the movie that Helly watches in the first episode.
I don't think she swears.
I don't think she swears.
No, I don't think so. It's really interesting, right? It definitely invites you to hypothesize about the scary numbers. I think at the end of the day, I think my leading theory about what macro data refinement is doing is nothing. I think that the purpose of the severance floor is the severance procedure, and there is a lot of stuff meant to occupy their time and attention and try to give them purpose, but does not actually have any.
Yeah. And we talked about lab-based psychological tests or cognitive tests that somebody might do on a computer. And is Helly doing something like binning off the data, or is she being trained to have a certain kind of reaction that is being measured? Is all of this timing and percentage completed being used as data to understand something about human behavior of the severed individual? I think that is definitely a potential to be keyed into and exploring as we continue to watch.
I also think, just take it back to the first episode and Mark's long walk to the office. And, we even talked about it last time of just how it does kind of have that lab rat quality, right? There's just a labyrinthine nature to Lumen. And I think it's certainly worth pondering. Like, clearly some experimentation is happening within the world of Severance. Is it the severed individuals themselves who are the subjects of the experiment, or is it something that they are doing with these numbers? I think it's not a stretch to say that this feels like a central mystery to the show, and I imagine something that we will get like a very concrete answer on at some point in time. We do not have it here through episode 2, at the very least, until further notice. It's those damn dirty eels.
Yeah. And I was thinking about it because the line that Dylan had about the case files expiring, the fact that they like don't frequently get the caricatures that, you know, and I think he mentions that it was something that Mark did that now they're more likely to finish, which again felt like a random comment that was sort of notable. But the other thing is, again, I sort of had this theory that the files expire just to give these innies a sense of purpose, because if the files don't expire, they have no motivation to do it. But at least if there is like there's like a time limit that you're going to have.
It's a variable reinforcement schedule.
Exactly.
Melissa, do you got erasers for this one? What are you throwing on the board?
I mean, that's my big one, is that I don't think they're doing anything, is that I think that the numbers they are the numbers, basically. They are being tested. And whether or not the emotional aspect of the numbers is related to the fact that they're looking at like amygdalar function or something, I don't know if it really even goes that far. But yeah, that was sort of my other one. The other question that I had, and so I've got less of a theory about it, but it seemed notable to me that they talk about the fact that Irving has been at Lumen for 3 years. Mark has been there for 2 years. And yet Mark is now senior refiner. And Irving does mention at one point, he's like, I don't want to be senior. So maybe it is as simple as that. But I wonder if there is another reason why Irving theoretically got passed over.
Sleeping on the job.
Yeah. Is it just the sleeping? Maybe. But yeah, I did think that
his old ass keeps falling asleep.
Not his fault. He was hired older than Dylan.
So funny. Not my fault that I was hired as an older man.
Yeah, which is just like such a because he hasn't experienced all of the years leading up. So it's not like he's like, yeah, it's not experience. It's not my fault that I've done more things and lived more. No, they've lived theoretically kind of the same amount of life.
He was born older.
Yeah, he was born older. Dr. Amanda, any erasers, whether it's about these theories or anything else from the episode?
Yeah, so like in this erasers category, like I'm up at the whiteboard. I've got like my Charlie Kelly style, threads and pictures and notes up here. And
the path board. Yes,
exactly. Pepe Sylvia. No, I am at the board and I am writing Miss Casey ? Right now and drawing a big circle around that, because in this episode we get introduced to Miss Casey. We get introduced to the wellness session. The wellness session is a very unusual kind of session. You are presented, or at least in this version of it, Irving is presented with a number of pleasing facts. He must react to each fact equally, enjoy each fact equally. He's not allowed to react verbally. There's apparently points that are being deducted.
Yep.
If too many points get deducted, the wellness session ends immediately. So who is Miss Casey? What is happening in these wellness sessions, to the point that Melissa had about, is this an experiment? Are the innies being observed? This seems like a weird kind of psychological experiment in its own right. So my what's up with Miss Casey is up on the board. And the other note I'm putting on the board is Irv's fingernails.
Yeah. So Irv, when he falls asleep, he sees this gruesome ooze, this dark black sludge, which you also see in the opening credits quite a bit. In addition to that, like that seems like some sort of like, he snaps out of it and certainly there is no ooze that anyone else can see. And when he snaps out of it, he can't see it either. But he does seem to have some sort of like inky fingertips, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's weird. There's like some dirt or something. Maybe Irv's been to the greenhouse. Who knows what's going on there?
Yeah. He's got some dark fingertips.
Yeah. A couple other things actually that
a finger trap?
Yeah. The finger traps are safe as long as you know how to use them, right? I think was how Dylan described it, which I thought was very fun.
Yeah.
A couple other things that I was thinking about. Petey mapping out the floors, like all the hallways on the severed floor. And he references that he left the original for Mark's Innie. But sort of the question there of like, what else is happening on that floor? Why is it so big? Which I think is a kind of ongoing mystery. And then the other thing is to just everything around the break room, because again, like we hear this recording of this sort of like very religiously coded self-flagellation, apologizing, I am not worthy kind of stuff. And it's, first of all, like heartbreaking to hear and really kind of a devastating, like everything about you. I think everything, like all the hackles go up because it's like, this is not, something is wrong here. But it does feel like, is there more to it than that? Or is it just this repetitive apology that eventually sort of breaks them down because there is so little else? Like, I still have questions about the break room and what's going on there.
Yeah.
Yep.
The tape recording, what we hear is Milchick's voice, I believe you're not sorry. And then we hear Mark's voice, all I can be is sorry. Forgive me for the harm I've caused this world, that I may atone for my actions.
Dark.
Yeah.
Quite dark. I have the break room down, as well as the code detectors, and Mr. Grainer. I have all of those down on my list as finger traps. We talk about finger traps as like you're in danger, but like this is the danger. Mr. Grainer, what an incredible introduction to this character. So Helly is trying to get out. She has a note. She's going to try and, like explain to herself, her outside self, that she doesn't want to be here. So she takes, having heard that there's code detectors, she takes this note. She gets on the elevator anyway, and red lights go off. She gets out, and here comes Mr. Grainer, who Mark is going to try to explain the situation to as best as he can, while Grainer's face does not move at all. There's like 1,000 wrinkles in his forehead as he's just like frowning very steadily at Mark. And when Mark finally finishes talking and is trying to take blame for what has happened to Helly, big shot division chief now, Mark S. On you then. And then they go, and that's Grainer. This guy, I do think, worth being afraid of.
Yeah. Grainer's scary.
Scary dude. We don't like him.
Yeah. This is one scary looking MFer. I mean, like perfectly cast. Like this guy could not exist in the same room as a puppy. Like, it's like he is so menacing and foreboding and just like really bad looking guy. Who is the actor who brilliantly portrays him? I'm looking. But he's really very, very well cast here.
That's Michael Cumpstead is the name of the actor.
Cumpstead. You don't want to cross him.
Yeah. Scary guy. Very scary guy. A very obvious finger trap this episode, of course, is Petey. He's bleeding from the nose and mouth at the end of it.
Yeah, it's not good. Like, I'm worried about a number of people. You know, Helly doesn't seem to be having a great time. Mark is getting into trouble. He's got Petey in his house now with Cobell like living next door. There's a lot of people who seem like they could be in trouble. Irv is on Milchick's radar for snoozing on the job, but like Petey is dividing into multiple people. He's got blood coming out of his orifices. Like, he's still topping the charts here for the most in danger, in my view.
Who do you got, Melissa?
Yeah, so like Petey is certainly the top. The kind of left field pick that I wanted to bring up is we get this interaction with the Whole Mind Collective with Mark's Audi. And they make reference to the fact that Jane Egan, so an interesting, we've kind of heard some reference, I think, to Keir and the Egans. So I think we're kind of like pieced together what all that means. But Jane Egan is kind of talking to Congress about, and they are trying to get the severance procedure outlawed. And so to me, it's like, I think the whole world, like the whole country might be in danger. I think that there is some kind of stuff in the works out there. And I think that it will be very interesting. I think going into season 2, I suspect we might see even more of that.
Yeah.
Josh, did Dan Erickson go to the George R. R. Martin School of Naming Characters? What kind of name is Jame?
Jame is a George R. R. Martin character for sure. A one-handed George R. R. Martin character for sure. No, this, you know what? We get like, if anything, the names are often quite simple here. Petey, Mark, Helly, like these are not names that you get in Westeros.
Helly's like, a little weird, but I feel like it's
weird, but they're all like very like nursery schoolish,
right?
You know?
The ultimate. Well, there are some Muppets in the George R. R. Martin universe,
certainly.
But I do think the move
Shouts
of like
to my guy Kermit Tully
taking a very normal name and then like just chopping one letter off of it. It's like funny to me every time. Every time.
Okay. Any other finger traps that we want to observe, or do we want to go on to the MDE, the music dance experience, which is obviously the Melon Bar?
I don't know. I think I have another one.
Okay, I think I have one more finger trap as well. I also have another MDE. The other thing that I thought was really interesting and something that I just wanted to bring up is Milchek talking in this like meeting where they're like passing the ball around and whatever. And he's got 2 different lines that just made my skin crawl. Seeing her here with all of you, I'd say she most definitely has a family. Again, this whole like work should be your family, you know, who needs an outside family type thing. And then things like death happen outside of here, not here. A life at Lumen is protected from such things. And I think a great potential response to that from all of you is gratitude. And it's just like so sinister, but also a very dark idea that the innies will never experience a whole lot of things, good and bad, and that is being portrayed to them as like a positive situation. And just the very like kind of sinister vibes of Milchek in that conversation.
Yeah. My husband, who likes to be a named character on my podcast, so his name is Nathan, Nathan named character on this podcast. He pointed out that he thinks that Milchek is like a very brilliant take on the Nurse Ratched type of character. And this like idea of being like the warden / caretaker and this abusive paternalism, as I mentioned it. And he sort of treats them diminutively like children. They have those childlike names. But it's very effectively creepy. And Trammell Tillman is the actor who portrays Milchek. And I think that this is like such a compelling performance. Like he's both charming and also very, very off-putting. So this was another, you know, we saw him in episode 1. Obviously, we're getting to see more of the way that he interacts with the innies and the role that he plays in observing them. But it's like you said, Melissa, this idea that like work is family, we're all family here, and the way that is used in a coercive manner. This is kind of taking that notion up to an 11 and making like this funhouse mirror version of it. And I think it's really, really interesting.
Yep. The Melon Bar is ridiculous, but it's not just the Melon Bar, and I think that this is consistent with what we're all talking about right now. Anyway, it's like it's the icebreaker. It's like the pass the ball around to get to know each other. Like the infantilization of these people is a vibe, whether or not it's like a great vibe or a scary vibe. It's certainly a vibe, and even like sort of like again, like that elevator Muzak sort of score that plays underneath Dylan trying to choose the exact right piece of melon. You know, all of these different things that are sort of like cascading through that. I think it just like it really exemplifies this tension between Severance being like sort of like this surreal, almost pretty funny kind of show, you know, Office, you know, sitcom sort of show, and then there being like these incredibly dark, sinister elements that are bubbling beneath it, that like these folks are so excited to eat melon because they don't experience death, but I don't think they experience dinner either, despite what Irving says whenever he shows up.
I love how Irving also just like instinctually goes in for the trust fall, and Milchick's like, no, Irv, we're not doing the trust
No
falls.
trust falls.
No trust falls.
Not this time.
Yeah, the melon is like the exciting reward. And we also in this episode see the vending machine where they have like such exciting options as like, I don't know, raisins and
Shrivels.
like,
Yeah.
So it's like clear
In our
that
original podcast, we did a real deep dive on these, I believe.
Yeah, we did.
We looked real close.
as we are wont to do. So yeah, it's clear that there is like a paucity of like actually enticing and appetizing and enjoyable things in this environment, and they do that to sort of like maximize the hedonic value that people are getting from caricature portraits and erasers, and it seems very silly, and it is like very quaint. I'll say, like, you know, having small children, it is amazing what you can get people to respond to as an incentive. Like the amount of times that they will do anything for like a small piece of plastic crap is like incredible. So I mean, I think that it's funny that it's created this world. I think it is infantilizing. It is also very, very funny. Melon is like a very funny food to pick. And Melissa, as you pointed out, they don't even have the best melon in this melon bar. Like this melon bar is absent any watermelon. I think that it looks like it is cantaloupe and honeydew melon exclusively. Although I did, if you'll look in the private chat, I did link you both to a melon guide, just so you could be aware that there are a lot of pale green and pale orange melons.
There's so many different melons that I never knew existed.
Different melons.
Goddess?
And I know this.
Harper?
Gallia. There's also what was the one I like?
Snow leopard?
Yeah.
Snow leopard is good.
Interesting.
There's Crenshaw is a good name for a melon. The Crenshaw. I know this because
Crenshaw sounds like a fixer at Lumen.
I am often a farm share subscriber, so you get lots of different, you know, what the heck is this? And they say like, oh, it's the Charentius melon or whatever. So we don't know for sure what these melons are. It's hard to ID them. I think a lot of people have a lower estimation of melon than they should because they're not eating ripe, high quality melons.
Yeah.
They're only getting like something in a fruit cup out of a refrigerator. You're not getting the good stuff, but I don't know that they're getting the good stuff at Lumen either.
No.
My dad loves melon.
He loves melon.
Loves
That's
it.
so cute. I love that about your dad, Josh.
We did a family trip many years ago to Italy, and like everywhere we went, he would order like prosciutto wrapped melon because that's what they would, you know, that's how they would serve it. And then he would unwrap the prosciutto and just eat the melon. My man loves melon. Yeah,
that's so wild.
Yeah, like crazy behaviir. And then my brother ate a caprese salad at literally every single meal. It's like, that's good, but enough, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a whole wide world to explore here, folks.
Particularly, there. Oh my gosh.
You clearly, Josh, you're the only person in your family ordering food at that level.
Listen, my named character wife, Emily Fox, a great chef. So I'm a very lucky man.
Yes.
So of course. Anything else about the melon bar that we want to observe here, or even like the rolling of the ball? How are you guys good on enamel? Your enamel is okay for now.
It's such a weird. It's like it's truly a very strange and like bordering on torturous choice to play this get to know you ice breaking game for people who have been completely wiped of their sense of self. Yeah, Helly's hair is what is known as shoulder length. I mean, it's very, very funny. And then Mark, you know, doesn't have anything to say. Irv knows all 9 core Lumen principles. It's like I think that it's effective because like what the hell is the point of any of these icebreaker activities? They're all sort of torturous. Like, I happen to really take some kind of perverse pleasure in a very contrived activity. So I usually get kind of into an icebreaker game. But I think that the correct attitude when you're forced to do something that is allegedly fun at work is to get the hell out of there.
Yeah. I think that's probably the most fun activity at work. Leaving.
My work frequently does a like fun facts scavenger hunt, essentially. So everybody has to send my boss like a fun fact about themselves, and then it's on a sheet and you have to like wander around and figure out who the fun fact is about. Which the first time I did it, I'd been at the company for about a week and a half, and so I was like, I know nobody, and this is very intimidating and scary, and I basically didn't participate. And then we did it again like a month ago, and I was like, okay, now I actually know people and can have conversation and sort of make some guesses. So yeah, but I have
nightmare
a
fuel.
Who had the weak enamel, Melissa? Whose fun fact was that?
I don't know. I think that there were some good ones though. One of my coworkers has a llama friend, and that he was able to like share photos of.
We love llamas. Love llamas on RHAP.
Yeah. But yeah, I have a past life as a new student orientation. Like I was like working full time to make new student orientation happen at my undergrad university. So I've spent I've spent a lot of time doing icebreakers and coming up with icebreakers. And yeah, there's a big, you gotta pick the right ones for the right vibe, the right people. It's, it's more of an art than people realize.
It's more of an art than a science, the icebreaker.
Yeah.
I want to talk about one other potential thing.
I have an MDE.
As an MDE.
Yeah. Can I share my MDE?
Of course, please.
I think that there are tremendous vibes emanating off of Irving and Bert's initial meeting.
Ooh, interesting.
In the lobby of the Wellness Center.
Yeah.
I love these vibes. We get Christopher Walken on this television show.
Yeah. Christopher Walken is a music dance experience.
Oh, yes. That Fatboy Slim music video, that is a music dance experience. That is I will say that is
I think that's the music dance experience. Yeah.
Christopher Walken shows up doing Christopher Walken things. This scene between John Turturro and Christopher Walken, two of the like absolute greatest treasures in all of American film and television, is absolutely lovely. Irving is a great appreciator of art. We find out that Bert is the department head of optics and design, O&D. And it's rare to meet a sophisticate like Irving who really appreciates what he does, because most people are just waiting for the new handbag totes. And
they're coming. New ones coming in a month.
There's new ones, and that's
all I'm going to be thinking about.
That's all that Irving's going to be thinking about.
Unbelievable. Now, of course, we love Christopher Walken. We are inclined to feel warmly about Bert based on this interaction. Melissa, however, one of the other main characters on this show, and one of the four MDR employees, Dylan, is not as fond of Bert. He says that guy is a fuck, is what he says about Bert. And Irving says Bert is not a fuck.
Yeah. It's this back and forth. It's incredible. But also, a very fun, the fact that we see this like very sweet interaction happen. And then Dylan's like, no, man, this is all bad.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's a shriveled raisin cute.
Oh, no. Boy. My goodness.
Oh, they're not that old, Melissa.
Yeah, it's not his fault that he got hired old.
It's not his fault that he was hired as an older man.
Leave his shriveled raisins alone.
I didn't mean. I'm sorry. That's not what I meant.
Yeah. Bert is a shriveled raisin. Bert is not a shriveled raisin.
Yeah.
Unreal.
Adorable.
Can I add to the music dance experience the moment where they all collectively join Helly to entrap the scary numbers when she sees them for the first time? That's a very moody scene. That's a very like what's great about the scene too is like numbers, they're not that scary. You know, like nothing really happens majorly visually other than like some of the numbers are bigger and they're like floating around. And they all like kind of like gather around Helly's computer as if the world's survival hinges upon her getting this right. Great scene. Very, very good. An incredible game that was created by friend of the podcast, Daniel
Dan
Schiffman.
Schiffman, yeah. I was just trying to find where that lives on the internet as you were mentioning this, but I would love to share with our listeners, if you weren't along for the ride when we originally covered Severance during its airing, the great Dan Schiffman, who is a brilliant computer scientist and professor at NYU, created a game that it looks exactly like the MDR sorting experience, and you can sort your own numbers into bins. And I have to say, like, the numbers are scary. Like, once you go through it, it's uncanny. It's very, very cool. Well, if we can't find it while we're on the pod, we'll
I'm on it right now. In fact, I'm
Okay.
I'm binning Drainsville. I'm 1% complete. Lumen-industries.com. Oh god, these numbers are actually kind of terrifying. 329 is freaking me out hard right now. It's a great game, and you can while away the hours playing the macro data refinement as designed by Professor Schiffman. So that's lumen-industries.com. Didn't work for me on Chrome. Did work for me on Safari.
Okay.
How about that?
Yeah.
Caricature portraits, Dylan. Yeah.
Dylan is an embarrassment of wealth in that regard. I mean, from the eel theory to all of his accrued wealth of tier incentives, the Bert is a fuck, like everything
with Dylan is the funniest part of this episode.
This is great. And this was like us last week, we had caricature portraits, and I think that our pal, friend of the pod, Michael Chernus as Rickon, got a lot of points racked up there. But this is a category that was like literally kind of built for Dylan. He's so funny. And this is the episode was a bit of his coming out party for him to flex some of his comedic chops as well as his muscles on the surfboard when he is in his caricature portrait.
Yeah, I think he imagines that his Audi lives on a boat.
A houseboat,
a houseboat.
Which makes sense if they're all out on the ocean.
Yeah. And, the explanation that Mark gives is dumb because he said it dumb. And Dylan is firing on all cylinders this episode. This is truly his coming out. And it's so great. And I promise, folks, if you're watching this for the first time, it's not the last time Dylan's going to be great.
I think in so it was 2022 when this show initially debuted, and at the end of that year when we were covering Severance on post-show recaps, Long May She Reign, we ended the year with like a bunch of superlatives, and one of like the consensus superlatives was that Dylan was the funniest character on TV that year.
Like all of TV, which
of
is
all
crazy,
of TV.
But yeah,
so we're big Zach Cherry fans here. Initially, I think certainly for Amanda and I think he was most known to us for a one-off appearance, but like an incredibly memorable one-off appearance on Succession.
A real diamond in the rough.
A real diamond in the rough, and like now and forever, he is Dylan. And hopefully lots of other things too in the future, but like Dylan is forever. Dylan is Dylan is also a vibe. Dylan is a music dance experience. Dylan is everything. He's absolutely everything.
I have a Dylan related question on this rewatch that I wondered. Do we think that Dylan knows what a waffle party is, or he's vying to get his first one?
I think he knows. I think he's gotten.
He knows.
I think he knows.
He seems pretty excited. He seems like he's excited with like a little bit of like a knowing wink.
Okay.
I think the waffle party may be a mystery to all of us. I'm not so sure it's a mystery to Dylan.
Yeah.
I think Dylan might know exactly what he's getting into with the waffle party.
And he's stoked on it. Yeah.
Yeah. He's stoked on waffles.
Yeah,
Just like
I mean, who
some other
wouldn't be?
people have been stoked on pie. Dylan is stoked on waffles. If you out there, by the way, have any theories about what a waffle party might be, we would love to hear them. Severance, RHAP at gmail.com. Hit us with your waffle party theories. Any other caricature portrait candidates here, or should we go to the waffle party? Our
Let's
MVP
go to the
of the
waffle
week.
party.
Who are we moving closer to refiner of the quarter this week? Melissa, who do you have as your waffle party candidate?
Yeah, so this one was actually hard because Mark for me was kind of the standout in terms of the fact that he's like taking one for Helly for this break room thing. He's taking care of Petey. But then Outie Mark is really awful on this date. And like just a really kind of
A messy individual
in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can I like just say Any Mark?
Mhm.
Any Mark is the MVP of the episode.
Yeah,
And we're
Any
going to
Mark.
ignore half of what Outie Mark is out there doing.
They're essentially different people according to certain people's perspectives on Severance. Mark would disagree.
Mhm.
Mark would say that it's just all those points are going to me, but he's not here to say otherwise. So Any Mark gets Melissa's MVP point. Dr. Amanda.
I give this week's waffle party MVP point to Mr. Milchek, who is the hardest working man at Lumen. He's like doing a lot. He's everywhere. He's in the hallway with Helly. He's surveilling everyone at all times. He's running back and forth between Cobell and the rest of the MDR team. He's bringing the melon to the party. You got to love the guy who shows up with the melon to the party. Yeah, we've talked about how he's creepy, how he's unnerving, how he's very sinister, possibly evil, but he is really like, he can't call out sick one day. Can you imagine? You think Rainer's going to do all that?
They would have to clone Mr. Milchick and have a Mr. Milchick clone fill in for him on his off days.
Indeed. Yeah. I just think he is like holding it down and getting things done. So he gets my nod for MVP of the week.
Okay. And
two Milchek things that stood out for me this episode. One, first of all, we get the comment about 3 raw eggs with milk being Kira's favorite breakfast, because Helly got asked about Kira's favorite breakfast. So
clearly it was like, here's a new bit of information that like, if this didn't work, you would probably retain.
Exactly. Some like short-term memory versus long-term memory testing, which I think is very fun, but also 3 raw eggs with milk. Gross.
Yeah.
You're not going to want to do that when RFK is head of the FDA.
And also,
you're not going to want to do.
Watch out for your enamel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
our enamel
true.
is in danger.
That's true.
But yeah, the scene that stood out to me even more was when Helly's going back and forth out of the stairwell, because her first reaction when she comes out is, I don't want to be in there, do I? And Milchek's response is, you're learning that you do. When we heard you were coming here, it was like a miracle. It's amazing what you're doing. And I was like, what does that mean? That is wild. But it was also just this like, first of all, he like lies to her when she said, oh, I'm trying to leave. And he's like, no, this is just part of the process. Like, don't worry about it. And it's very sinister at the same time that I'm like, wait, what is going on there? So yeah.
Because Melissa, you mentioned the raw eggs, and now we have that piece of detail from episode 2. I did want to go back to Mark's quiz that Helly got completely right, because when this happened, and I think I did this in 2022 also, I quickly was like, oh my gosh, like this is a standard orientation and memory test. And so for each item, who are you? That's orientation to person. In which state or territory were you born? That's an autobiographical memory detail. Please name any state or territory. That's a fund of knowledge question. So this is general memory, not autobiographical memory. What is Mr. Egan's favorite breakfast? We were like, that's a weird one, right? That was an immediate recall question from the new information that Milchek had shared with her on her walk. And to the best of your memory, what is or was the color of your mother's eyes? A heartbreaking question and a long-term memory for distant biographical memories. So this is like a quick and dirty, kind of neuropsych basic orientation and memory test. And what we know now about Severance is that it wipes out all autobiographical memory. It wipes out immediate and long-term storage, but retains fund of general knowledge memory. And there is some evidence that these systems are distinguishable. So in theory, while we can't do it now, maybe we could create something like a severance procedure. Would it be this clean and perfect? Probably not. But I think
No.
it's cool that this maps onto something that is at least biologically and cognitively plausible.
I nearly gave my MVP point to Helly again. For she's such an interesting character. We see her struggling mightily as an innie here, who has been alive for 10 hours. But we do then also meet the Audi Helly, who is a mystery character to us. And I think the Britt Lauer, who plays the character, I think the way that she carries herself as Helly, as Audi Helly, like feels different. The way she moves, the way that she like holds her hands as she goes. Hearing that it's a miracle that you came here is a fascinating detail. So like Helly instantly becomes, if she wasn't already sort of one of the most compelling characters on the board as far as like the mysteries of the show and everything, this episode only sharpens that further. But I do want to spread the love. I want to spread the wealth. And I by the end of this week, with last week, Melissa, you gave your point to Devin. Amanda gave her point to Miss Cobell, and I gave my point to Helly. Now we have Any Mark on the board. We have Mr. Milchick on the board. And I know that you said Mr. Milchick was unnerving, Amanda. But I'm just going to take the out and give my MVP point to Irving. I'm going to get Irving on the board here because I think Irving shows up in this episode as a riveting player on the board. In the first episode, he's sort of just, he is just like full on hip mode for much of the first episode. And for much of this episode, he's that as well. He is... He's not thrilled that Mark broke protocol with the desk photos of his office mates. He wasn't supposed to take those away yet. He also has this great moment of just like when he pulls like the divider down to share that intel with Mark. Just a lot of really funny stuff. But once the floodgates open and the oil and the ooze, whatever it is, spills out, Irving becomes this mesmerizing character for the rest of the episode for me. His interaction with Bert is a really, really wonderful scene. His session with Miss Casey is it's both somehow eye-opening while being like even more mind-boggling than anything that we've seen on the show up to this point. And he's right at the center of it. And I think John Turturro, such an accomplished actor, does such an excellent job of carrying a couple of different energies as this character. Like there's one where he is an old and he is a sophisticate and he has this appreciation for the arts as limited as he can experience them in sort of like a bare place, like the severed floor of Lumen, while simultaneously I think being like very childlike, like very like, well, I'm going to tell dad if you don't like get this protocol right with like the photos and everything. But even the way that he reacts to hearing about his Audi, I think is just like very, very innocent and very pure. And I think that, we will certainly have opportunities to give MVP points to a lot of different characters. And I think it's enough that like Dylan is clearly the funniest character of this episode. I think for me, of the new players who are like, if we weren't just giving them to the old regulars so far, I think Irving is that character from episode 1 who increases in intrigue by a lot here in episode 2.
Yeah, it's a really subtle yet compelling and heartwarming and funny performance all at once. And I think we see all of those sides of it in this episode. The wellness session, I like particularly love the way that without any dialogue, he manages to react to every fact, even though he's not really supposed to, but you can still see his reaction to these facts and how hungry, how much he yearns for a richer experience, while also, as you said, Josh, like being very much a good soldier for Lumen in this very kind of child like black and white version of morality that he's currently stuck in. So I love that, I love John Turturro in this role. And I do think that every, the fact that we get to see his performance in 9 episodes of television in this season is such a gift. So I fully endorse this MVP from you.
I love Irving. He's a really great character. Final order of business. We have to hand out Mark's Crystal Head Cube, which is not a prize. It's just a thing they gave Mark. So it's just a thing we're giving to random things on the show. Mine goes to Mark's Crystal Head Cube, which gets named on the show this week.
Perfect. Great job, Josh.
I accomplished the assignment. I also have the vending machine just in general on here.
Vending machine was fun. Yeah. I gave this to Mark's date, whose name I shall not utter, because she deserves something. She really suffered through that terrible date.
Yeah.
She was totally kind and understanding and charming. And I think this gets to the point, Melissa, like Innie Mark and Outie Mark are very different places really different. Right now.
Yeah.
And I would not want to go on a date with Outie Mark. And I think that she deserves some, I mean, probably, but Mark's Crystal Head Cube of all things, like she could at least throw it at him, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. There were multiple points of this date that I wanted to be like, just leave. You don't need to do, you're being too nice right now. Like, just leave. Go. This is not. Yeah.
But one thing that I want to mark about the date is mark the date. One thing I want to notice about this, like this going out to the restaurant, Mark and his date out on the town. I am looking more at what's happening in the outside world, outside of Lumen, and how is this world populated? Who are the people that we run into and we see? And it's like a very sparse world. Like we've seen Mark go to a couple restaurants now, Pips VIP Lounge.
I was surprised he didn't go to Pips on the date.
It seems like the best place.
Not fancy enough.
He's a VIP. He should be showing off.
This is another restaurant that's like, I don't know. I'm trying to get a sense of the world outside of Lumen, and it doesn't look that vibrant and exciting.
Yeah. You got a Crystal Head Cube to throw at somebody, Melissa?
Yeah, I sort of have one and then I have a bonus. So the head cube that I wanted to shout out is this like opening routine that Mark does as he is now senior refiner, which first of all, I have questions about why this is all in the responsibility of the senior refiner. But it is, I guess. I once again, I think, again, we did this last time, but I screenshot the list because I wanted to shout out such greats as, first of all, you're refilling the soap dispenser, dust the Lumen compliance handbook and appendices, review employee lunches, check refrigerator temperature, inspect keyboards for weak keys, and acknowledge Keir Egan portrait verbally or silently. And then finally self-assess, can I lead today?
Can I lead today? Yeah. What if the answer is no?
Right? I don't know. I guess you need to.
Do you go see Miss Casey? Like what happens?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so that was all just wonderful. And then the other thing I wanted to shout out is we are not the only people talking about Severance on the internet this week. I was watching over on Dropout TV, which D&D fans will be aware of. It's basically the evolution of college humor. You can find their stuff all over YouTube. Highly recommend. And then
great shows.
Yeah. So things like Game Changer, Make Some Noise, actually Dimension 20. And if any of that is familiar to you, that is all hosted on Dropout TV. One of the shows on Dropout is Adventuring Academy, in which the great Brennan Lee Mulligan interviews different people about tabletop role-playing games, and they have different conversations. So this week he interviewed Brian David Gilbert, who is I think very heavily involved in like video game for the most part, and they talked about Severance, and they talked about Severance for like quite a while, and it was very interesting. And so I highly recommend, if you have access to Dropout TV, checking out the interview, because it was very fun to hear other people talking about Severance, and it made me very much want to talk to both of them about Severance.
I was just going to say,
yeah,
you know, not gonna lie, like we are, as we've said, like we are the Severance podcast,
the best.
So like they should really be
they might
knocking
come
on
for our
doors.
jobs, to be fair, but yes, I would like to talk to them about Severance.
Yeah, they should come to our office. I'd love to talk to them about a lot of things. Severance season 1, episode 2. We just completed the half loop. How do you feel?
Great.
I'm ready to go around the rest of the loop.
All right.
All right.
Well, we're going to turn in our podcast innies and become our outies once again. And as we do so, our innies will come back online having watched the 3rd episode of Severance and talking about it here on this podcast in perpetuity, both in terms of like that's what we've been doing, it seems like, is just talking about Severance in perpetuity over the course of these last 3 years at different points. It's also the name of episode 3. So in perpetuity, coming next on the Severance podcast. Make sure you are subscribed. WeKnowSeverance.com. You'll get all the info there. You could also search in your podcatcher of choice, We Know Severance. You'll find us that way. Make sure you are subscribed. You'll never miss an episode. Tell your friends to subscribe to the greatest Severance podcast around. Send in feedback, severancerhap@gmail.com. Talk to us at various different locations on the internet. Blue Sky, baby. At Round Howard over there. Amanda, you're on Blue Sky, and Ben Stiller has decided to follow you again.
Oh, heck yeah, he has. So you should be like Ben Stiller, creator, director of Severance, and follow me on Blue Sky at Dr. Amanda R.
Melissa's also on Blue Sky.
Yeah, Melissa Woodward 28. I have re-skeeted. Is that what we're saying?
Yep. Yep. It is.
One
We're
skeet. That's the extent of my Blue Sky so far, but I will.
It's popping off,
more.
Melissa. Get
Always
in
be
there.
skeeting. Always be skeeting here on Blue Sky. If you want more from Amanda and Melissa, check out their podcasts, Crying, Laughing, and Whirlwind podcast, respectively. Seek them out on the podcatchers of choice as well. And then next time out, we talk about a lot of stuff here on Severance. I'm just reading the quick recap of what happens in episode 3, and I am so excited to guide everybody through it. So
Yeah.
turn off your podcast outies and just stay locked in here to Severance. We'll be back in short order talking episode 3, season 1 of Severance. Until then, everybody, bye.